welcome back to the When I Heard This podcast. My name is Nate Robinsoff, and I'm here with Joseph Tillman. How are you today, Joseph?
Doing well, man. Doing real well.
Why?
You know, it's a good day. It's just I'm trying to think of why I'm actually doing well.
Mm-hmm.
I feel great. I think it's a cup of coffee I had earlier today.
Where'd you get it?
It wasn't very good coffee.
Where'd you get it from?
I don't want to throw this place under the bus. They had the Lord's chicken and everything.
Your wife?
No. No, it's the place that has the Lord's chicken.
Ah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Not that evil-ass, creepy Satan chicken at the other place.
Yeah, but their coffee is terrible. So.
Today we are talking about why Christians always evangelize to people with noticeable problems instead of just normal, regular people.
Yep, that's what we're going to be talking about.
And that is a question that I had, and then I wrote a bunch of more questions about it, and we're going to answer those today.
Great.
First off, go to Patreon, $5. Click all the buttons around the things like subscribe, share, download, Rumble button, comment. Okay, so my first question is, why do Christians only go after broken people? And what are your thoughts on this? And do you think that this is a problem or a thing that occurs or whatever?
All right, so when you say broken people, how are you defining broken people?
Okay, so if I notice that you're in a wheelchair, I can be like, hey, you seem to be having issues. Have you heard about Jesus and our healing service? You could walk again next week, maybe, if Jesus cares enough.
Okay.
So come to our thing.
Okay.
So broken people or people with extremely like rehab outreach. Like, we know these people aren't having a good time, so we're going to go tell them about Jesus.
Yeah, sure.
And so that's what I mean.
Okay, so, all right, so that's how you're defining them. Okay, so, and you're saying that your experience is that the church or Christians only target these kind of people.
They put special emphasis on these types of people, and I don't know, like 75-25, that's who they're talking to about Jesus.
Right.
Because it's obvious.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree with the assessment.
Okay.
Especially if you're on the outside looking in to what a church is doing on an outreach or like event level type thing. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when churches are organizing outreaches or organizing social justice things, or they're organizing food drives or whatever it may be, it's always geared toward, or let me rephrase it, it's mostly geared toward people that have physical needs of some kind, mm-hmm. right? Like they need food, or they need clothing, or they need shelter. And so when churches are doing events that they're intentionally reaching out to this demographic. So I don't disagree with that. But in fairness, like, they're not the only ones, right? Like, there's nonprofits do this as well.
Nonprofits.
Mm-hmm. Provide food, provide shelter, provide clothing.
But that could be the sole purpose of that nonprofit.
Correct. Yeah,
but
I get it.
The sole purpose of Christianity is for everyone.
Yeah, but and I agree with that. But I agree the fact that it's for everyone, and we'll get to that in a second. Okay. Because I do think it's a problem if that's the only demographic that's being reached by a church. Okay. So I do think that's problematic. However, I actually think there's a precedent that's set biblically for the church reaching out to those who are in need.
Okay.
All right. And so it actually starts with Jesus. I think actually Jesus set the precedent on this.
Okay.
And so when Jesus in Matthew 25, when Jesus is talking to his disciples and talking to his followers about what's going to happen at the end of the day, the end of time, one of the things he does is he brings up this story where he talks about sheep and goats, and he's using it as an analogy between those that are following him, the sheep, those who are not following him, who he refers to as goats. And so,
Why are sheep always the good ones and goats are the bad ones?
you know, that's a good question, because they both have their issues to some degree.
Right.
Yeah, I'll ask Jesus why he wants to be a shepherd of sheep and not of goats.
Because goats are often Satan for some reason.
Yeah, you're right. They are.
Yeah.
They're depicted that way.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I'll have to think through that more. All right. Anyways,
Save it for another episode.
that's what we always do. All right. So, so in Matthew 25, Jesus says this: "For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you took care of me. I was in prison and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and take you in, or without clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." And so for the ones that are labeled the sheep, what he's saying is, when you cared for one of the least of these, when you cared for the one who was in need, it was as if you were doing it unto me. So there's the encouragement there to do these things, to feed those who are hungry, to clothe those who are naked, to give drink to those who are thirsty, to provide shelter for those that need shelter, like that. To visit those who are in prison, you can extrapolate that out, to visit those who are in rehab facilities, to all of these individuals that are in need, that are considered the least of these in society. Jesus actually says, take care of them.
Well, Naked People Outreach, I'd actually get behind and come to.
Yeah, I'll let you know the next time we do that. Okay. So, all right. And so Jesus does this, and then actually from like point one of the early church forming. So when we see in Acts 2, early church forms, well, in Acts 2:44 through 45, it talks about the fact that there was no one who was in need, and that they all shared everything in common. So if you had a need, they were selling land, they were selling goods to give to you, to give to the church, and then the church was distributing to those who had need. Galatians 2:10, Paul actually says, "They asked only that we would remember the poor, which I had made every effort to do." In James 1:27, James says, "Pure and undefiled religion before God the Father is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress, to keep oneself unstained from the world." So again, there's obviously this precedent that Scripture establishes to care for the poor, to care for the needy, to care for the least of these, to care for the widow, to care for the orphan. And so I think Scripture is actually the one that is pointing us in this direction. And I think from point one, there has been this intentionality to care for those who are in need in these ways. And so that's why you see, the homeless ministries, and you see the food ministries and clothing drives and all those kind of things. I think it's because that's kind of always been part of Christianity.
Okay.
Yeah. And so it's always been there. But do I think it's a problem if we're only targeting that demographic? Yes. And do I think it's a problem if we're doing that and we only view them through the lens of people who are in need? I do. And I think probably this gets back to maybe the core issue for me. It's the reason I have a problem if we're only targeting that demographic, or the reason I've got a problem if we're targeting that demographic, and maybe not exclusively, but we are doing things for that demographic, and we only see them as people who have need. I think we've missed the point too. And yes, Jesus wants us to care for those who are in need. That's obvious, yes. But there's a fundamental part in that regardless if you're lower class, middle class, upper class, regardless if you have found yourself in a horrible situation and now you're in prison, or maybe you've been widowed or orphaned, and so yes, there's a precedent there to care for those, but I think it's to ensure that individuals know if they do have these types of needs that they're not forgotten, they're not going to be looked over, okay? That they're still going to be valued in the kingdom of God. They're still going to be valued as image bearers of God. And I think the problem is if we're just leaving out a whole section of society that we're reaching because we can't just hit a physical need with them, I think what we're doing is we're not seeing the fact that everyone's being created in the image of God, and therefore everyone should be valued and loved and not forgotten, and everyone therefore should receive the gospel, which is for everyone. And so, yeah, I do think it's problematic if it's only targeted to that group. I think it's problematic if we're only seeing individuals who are in need as just simply individuals who are in need.
So missions trips are always to third world countries.
Yeah.
And they're always as deep into those third world countries where the 30th of worldest people are within that third world country. Where the kids don't have clothes on and they're playing stick dirt all day, and and the parents just are hanging around and doing food getting and stuff, and they all live in mud.
Yep.
Yeah. So why is that 99% of missions trips instead of going to Canada?
Right. All right. So historically, you're correct. All right. So historically, the historical context is that when modern missions began in like the 1700s, there was this push to reach those who did not know Christ. Well, in a lot of places, that meant going to countries that were outside of Europe, outside of America. And so, yes, they were reaching, these third world countries because America and Europe were already predominantly Christian or Catholic. And so as the Industrial Revolution hit, it created a further chasm between Europe and America and everybody else. And so now these countries are definitely, quote unquote, third world in the sense that they're behind the times in relation to the modernization of society that's going on in America and Europe. And so missionaries are being sent out from America and Europe to these third world countries, and really with the purpose of bringing the gospel to them. Okay. And so that was the purpose of this modern mission movement that was going beyond, because there had been, all right, maybe I'm getting something I don't really need to get into, but there had been this mixing of like establishing the church and colonization.
Okay.
And what modern missions was attempting to do was going there and I call it modern missions because going in there purely as an evangelistic motive.
Okay.
So it's going there purely as an evangelistic motive with the intent to share the gospel with people who have not heard the gospel. And so it's not connected at all with colonization.
Okay.
All right. And so they're going in and they're reaching people. And so that was the context. Many mission agencies actually developed a ministry for caring for the physical needs as a means to help people. So for example, we're going to provide people with clean water, provide people with access to food, okay? Teach people how to actually farm, okay? So they can have their own food. And then in the midst of reaching people and helping them on a physical level and a humanitarian aid type level, there's also reaching them with the gospel. I think, however, the forcing of American or European culture should have never coincided with the sharing of the gospel.
Okay.
And so I think what happened was, yes, they were not connected to any form of colonization, so that was a positive, but they still were wanting to bring in the culture of America or of Europe into these areas, believing that our culture was actually better. Okay. And you understand some things they're doing, again, because we're going to help you have cleaner water. We're going to help you, do some things to where we'll actually cut down on diseases that can be prevented, right? So some things were actually a positive thing. But to say, all right, well, now you got to dress a certain way, right? That was not necessary. Or you have to behave a certain way, act a certain way in the sense of mannerisms or in the sense of the way one carries themselves. No, that should have not been forced on these unreached people groups. Okay. And so even today, so that's kind of the historical setting, but even today, you're right. Most groups, mission teams, are going to work with people that have a physical need in some form or fashion. All right. So I'm doing a mission trip here to Central America in a few months, and we're going down there and providing medical care and providing construction.
Western medical care?
We will be working with doctors on the ground from that country in Central America. So we will actually be providing more of, and the Western care, quote unquote, would be, all right, we're gonna check for blood sugar levels, we're gonna check blood pressure, all those kind of things.
Colonizer.
No, terrible. And but we're working with doctors who specifically have an understanding of parasites in a way that even our doctors don't understand, because they're not dealing with people with parasites all the time, right? Where down there they are. And so, but what we're doing is we're bringing a medical team in to these areas that do not have regular accessibility to medical care. And so just these small things and being able to provide medicines for people who actually are diabetic or who are struggling with headaches or whatever it may be, or struggling with backaches because they're hurting because they've been farming their whole life. Like helping people the best we can with the medicines that are available to us for them. And if they have parasites, to help them, here's actually medicine to get rid of those parasites to actually make you feel better. Not have all these GI issues. And so it's a collaboration of us going in, working with a ministry that's based out of this country in Central America, and using doctors and other individuals from this country as well. And so it's kind of a collaborative thing we're doing. And the construction part we're doing is we'll be working with them as well on the construction side. And so it won't just be us building something for them. It'll be us building something with them. We're just helping to provide them the means for it, but it's for the building, but it's so that they can actually create a bakery, which in turn can become profitable for them. And people in the village can actually begin to have a skill set, make money, and it can be beneficial for the community as well. So I'm going into the country, and we're providing things on a physical level.
And literally setting up shop.
Yes, we're literally setting up shop. And so we're doing these things.
And you're trying to get them fat at the same time. As American as possible.
Hey, man, bread's bread, brother. Bread ain't bad, you know? So,
This is called confectionery sugar.
Anyways, and so we're going down there, and so yeah, we're doing these types of things, but then we're also working in these villages and sharing the gospel. And it's not like we're doing like a one-off kind of thing. We're working with a ministry that's there constantly.
Oh, okay.
So it's not like we're just showing up for 1 week, see you later, right? We're showing up and we're part of a continual program that's going on down there within these villages. And I've been going and doing trips like this to this specific country for about a decade. And I mean, and the results have been incredible. One of the things we did in one trip, they used to, in one of the villages, well, let me rephrase that, in all the villages, they would actually cook inside their homes, and they would cook over an open fire.
Mm-hmm.
And so smoke would fill the house. And they had all of these lung issues and asthma and everything else. And what we did was we showed them, again, with locals from the area, with the indigenous, working with them and showing them how to build eco stoves.
Okay.
And where it pumps the smoke out of the house, so it's not smoke filling the house. And then all of a sudden in these villages we were doing this in, you see lung issues decrease, asthma decrease, and so it actually becomes beneficial for them. So there's those kind of things that are being done that are helpful, but I don't view them as individuals that just need our help.
Okay.
Because if I did that, then I'm really dehumanizing them, and I'm treating them only as a cause that I need to get behind so that I can help them out.
But are you the majority or the minority?
In the way that I view that?
Yes.
That's a good question.
Okay.
That's a fair question. If you read resources like When Helping Hurts, I think that they would say in that resource, for example, the authors would say that I would be in the minority.
Okay.
And that most are going to do these types of things for people, not with them. And they're viewing the people as just individuals who have needs.
Because that's what it feels like to me and why I wanted to do this topic.
Gotcha.
That's my impression of the...
Yeah. So you're saying it from regardless if it's here in our own backyard or if it's in a third world country.
Right.
That
well,
tends
regardless
to be
of whether you're going to a rehab or a third world country,
right.
It doesn't matter what. The idea of only going after broken people that's the mindset people have behind it.
Yeah, and I think it's because we feel like we can help them in some ways, you know? And some of that comes from a good place, but again, if we're only viewing them as people we can help, what happens when they actually get the help?
I don't know.
And right. And I think a lot of people don't know.
Right.
Right. We get them. Okay. What happens if they actually get well? What happens if they actually don't have an addiction anymore? Do we know what to do with them then? Or are they just them? Like, are they just those people that got over an addiction?
Right.
Or are they, as they should be, part of the family of the local church?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I do want to serve in our community. Like our church is doing a local missions day to serve our community here in about a month. And I think that's awesome, but I don't view the people that we're going to help serve as just needy people.
Mm-hmm.
There are people that need to know they're valued. There are people that need to know they're loved. There are people that need to know they're cared about. And that would be the case regardless if they were, in need of physical resources or not. Because every individual should be valued as image bearers of God.
Mm-hmm.
And when we lose sight of that, I think is when things become problematic and where we can just, and I think it can even be a little bit of look at us. Like we feel good about ourselves. We help some people.
That's what Facebook's for.
Show all the people we've helped. and I think when we do that, yes, it
Look at
can.
this guy. Isn't he ugly and very can't walk? I told him about Jesus.
Right. I'm a superstar.
Right.
And I do think there is something rewarding about caring for people and helping to fulfill needs. But I would hope the most rewarding thing would be that I got to interact with an image bearer of God.
Okay.
And not reduce them down to a socially like economic state or a quote unquote brokenness state. Because as you and I both know,
I was struggling to come up with a blanket term for this type of thing.
yeah.
So I just picked broken.
Yeah. And I think it's a fair term. I think in the sense of, I think it's fair in the sense I think a lot of people would use it and understand what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah. But I do think that, and that maybe is the mindset that people think of the church as, well, the church is just going to go after the quote unquote broken.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we do that, we're selling ourselves so short of what Christ's desire for all of this was. Like when we read that passage in Matthew, it wasn't just that we would do good things. He said, if you do these things, it's as if you're doing it unto me.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, what he's telling people is, look at this. Like when you're doing this to that person, see me in them. See that that's my creation. And see my image in them. And I think that's the part that gets lost in our desire to quote unquote help people.
Okay, so my main thing about this topic is that the act of only going after broken people to recruit them to your cause, Christianity, feels very culty.
Okay.
Like, hey, come with us and we'll make your legs grow back, and you won't be, your family will love you again, and you won't want to do drugs anymore. Or on missions trips, like look at all these first world amazing things that we can do. If you come with us and join our cause, you can also have microwaves and
also have microwaves.
And so it feels like a cult like recruitment method and style or whatever to only go after people that are looking to actively improve themselves. And so then you get them, and then they end up tied up in a basement somewhere a year later. And so, but that's like the view of, to me, and I'm pretty sure it's a cliche, but that's like the view of this type of thing. Like, look at them only going after, Yeah. So that's because those people believe anything for a cheeseburger. And you know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
that's a simple way to put it, but but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get you. And I see where you're coming from. Like, I've never thought of it that way, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I see where you're coming from. Where it can seem that way. Of course, a couple of things that are different about this. You know, one,
compared to
that. Okay, so in other words, like, that's not culty, as you phrase it. Okay, right. So one thing is that, unlike a cult, one of the things that we're doing is that we are telling the truth and speaking the truth, and there doesn't have to be lies or manipulation to bring people in. And I do think that the cult part, one of the things you're talking about, I think there's maybe like a sense of manipulation. Like, I'll manipulate people to come to the church, manipulate people to come and be quote unquote Christian if I offer these services for them, and that's kind of like manipulating them a bit, right? And so I do I do see that perspective. But the other part is, in a cult, there's these there's these secrets, and even a bit the motivation of recruit people in is just we want to get more people right to the cult, but there's these secrets that are embedded within the cult. You never know fully all that's going on and what's happening. And I would hope that in churches that's not the case. I would hope there's not a bunch of just secret stuff going on, right? That everything is transparent and out in the open. And and Christianity's been around for so long that there really shouldn't be. I mean, there shouldn't be like any secret per se to a lot of people. And I'm talking about more of like in the United States. Like there's no secret that as a Christian, I want you, who is you being the kind of metaphorical you non-Christian person. I want the non-Christian person to become a Christian. Not so that my number can be bigger in our church, not so that I can say, look at who I just led to Jesus, right? But because I genuinely believe that the only way they're made whole is if they know Christ. I genuinely believe that not only about wholeness, but about their creative intent, they were actually created to know him. So therefore, I want them to know him. And so, but I also think that if we're only giving this message to the demographic that you're referring to as quote unquote broken, I agree that it will come across very culty.
Okay.
Because if we're only reaching those that are emotionally needy, physically needy, mentally needy, if that becomes the only demographic we're reaching, I could see where that would seem pretty cult-like and seem pretty manipulative and seem like, we're going to try to grab hold of the individual we believe is in the quote unquote weakest position right now, or weakest state, to join our group.
Okay.
But if the message is extended and offered to all people of all walks of life, regardless of income or race or education, then I think that we're actually doing it the right way.
Okay.
If we're offering it, and I acknowledge that the church must be better about this. I think the church must be better about reaching all people with the message, and then also the church must be better about the why that's behind our caring for those who are in need. Okay. And so I'll tell just a personal story. So there's a young guy that I was at their graduation this year, and I first met him when he was in middle school, and I was leading a group that was ministering in a low income area, and one of the things that I started really that was gripping me was the fact that we were doing these like after school type programs, but there were these boys that were getting older and getting into middle school and into high school. And I felt like they needed something more than just the after school program, because it wasn't going to hold their attention forever. Right. And so me and another gentleman began to meet with them. And what we do, we go on a Friday morning, pick all the boys up that were middle school, high school age, take them out, have breakfast, and then drop them off at their schools they would go to. And we've done that for years. And one of the boys just graduated this year, and it's just I just couldn't be more proud of him, But I didn't begin to invest in this young man's life, 6 years ago, for me to gain something out of it, right? I didn't know I was still going to be mentoring him 6 years later as he's graduating high school, but that's the way it's played out. And the motive is not that I feel like I can, quote unquote, do better for him. The motive is, hey, yeah, there's need in life, in a sense of like having a positive mentor come alongside and walk beside him, and help him in this journey of high school and everything else. But It was not for me to just feel like I was doing something good. Look at me, right?
Mhm.
And it wasn't because I really was like overwhelmed by his brokenness and I needed to quote unquote help him. It was just, man, here's an opportunity to love and to serve and to care for a young man that's made in the image of God and may not realize how valuable he really is. And I want him to know how valuable he is. He's not forgotten. And so that's important to me, and what walking with him. But what's also been important to me is walking alongside other individuals and having dialogue with them that come from a much more educated background, and they're skeptics of Christianity and church. And I'm spending time with them not because they're quote unquote broken, but because they need Jesus just as much as anyone else. Does that make sense? And so I think we've got to do the church has, when I say we, the church, leadership of the church, we just need to do a better job of making sure we're reaching all demographics for the right reason.
Are Christians afraid to evangelize to regular, normal people with all their parts and working parts and living in normal places? Like a dude with a dog and an apartment and a job?
Right. Yeah. Or so are you saying, are we afraid to like evangelize?
Are you afraid to, are Christians afraid to talk to people like that?
You know what? Well, I'll take this on a couple different levels.
Okay.
I think people can be afraid to talk to strangers anyway, but then secondly, you said the whole Christian part in it, and maybe they're not even a stranger, maybe they're a neighbor, right? And or maybe they're a family member. I do believe that many Christians are actually afraid to share the gospel.
But I mean,
I don't think it even matters. I don't think that even the demographic matters.
You don't?
No.
Okay.
Here's what I think. I think that it's easier to show up to serve some food at a soup kitchen, to show up to hand out some clothes on a clothing drive, to show up and build a wheelchair ramp for a lady who's in need of a wheelchair ramp. I think those things are easier than sharing the gospel for most people.
Okay.
So that's where I think it's not just about the demographic. I actually think it's about the confidence or the lack thereof that people have in sharing the gospel. Because honestly, Nate, I think if you ask most people to tell me, like, if you just walk up to the average Christian and say, "Can you share with me the gospel?" I don't think they could do it.
Right. We talked about that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just don't think they're just not equipped.
Right.
And as a leader, that's on me, and that's on the church. We've got to do a better job of equipping people to share the gospel so that regardless of the demographic, they can share the gospel. Regardless of where someone is on an educational level, they can share the gospel. And so, and then to make disciples. And so I think we're doing a lot of good things in our local and our international missions as a church, and caring for people, providing for people, helping people. And by helping, the biggest things is, in health terms, and quality of life terms. But I think we desperately need to ensure that we're not failing in the actual one great commission that Jesus gave us, and that was to go and make disciples of all nations. And I'm not sure that the church is really equipped, the American church in particular, is really equipped to share the gospel and make disciples. I think we're just found lacking in those areas.
Okay, so we live near Atlanta, right?
Sure.
Okay, so if any church around where we are said, hey, one group of people is going to go talk to homeless people up in Atlanta about Jesus, and another group of people is going to go to this music festival and talk to people about Jesus outside that, or any just normal outside something event.
Okay.
I think 90% of your people are going to go talk to homeless people.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah, and I would agree with that.
Okay.
And I think it's because they feel like with the homeless people, and this is just being honest, being
Okay.
real honest here, I think it's because they believe that they don't have to have enough answers or enough knowledge, like a higher level of knowledge than what they have. And so,
Okay.
in other words, that going to the homeless person
So
to
they
share
think
the
homeless
gospel
people
are
are
ignorant.
stupid.
Yeah, I think they believe, I won't say they're necessarily stupid, but they may be ignorant of the gospel. Or
Okay.
they may be not as inclined to ask difficult questions in return.
Okay.
And I think that feels easier. But I think that's across the board. I think anyone feels more comfortable talking with someone they deem to be less educated.
Okay.
I think I think that's just part of it. And unfortunately, it's a human flaw that we kind of set ourselves up as on a position to go, well, we're more educated or we're more affluent than these individuals. Therefore, it becomes a little easier to talk to them because I don't know if they're necessarily talking to them as a person that's out there equal.
Okay.
They feel they're talking down a little bit to them. And I hate that I'm saying that. I hate that I'm admitting that, but I think that that's just a human tendency.
Okay.
And so then I think it's extrapolated over into the church when you bring up the scenario you do, because most people are already afraid to share the gospel. They feel their knowledge of it is fairly low to begin with. So let me go talk to people that I feel like may not have the educational chops to be able to get into a debate with me on things.
Okay.
So let me talk with them. That'll be easier. I probably won't get as much resistance as I would talking to other people who may just quickly out of hand just disregard me. One, I don't want to be rejected. There's a fear of rejection in this as well, not just the fear of talking to someone and looking stupid, but I think it's just fear of rejection. Homeless person's probably not going to reject me as much. They're probably going to welcome my conversation with them, even if it's about Jesus. Where if I'm just going up to someone randomly in a music festival or concert, they may reject me just pretty quickly because they don't want to. They're not there to listen to that music and hear you talk to them about Jesus. So they're probably going to be a little more quick to dismiss you, right? Like I know there's a lot of evangelizing that happens around sporting events.
Okay.
At stadiums, and I think it's a really hard play for the church when they're trying to do it that way, because you're trying to get people's attention about Jesus, and now it's becoming a nuisance to them because they're not there to hear about Jesus. They're there to watch their team play, or if you're at a music concert to hear the music. I mean. And so I think we set ourselves up almost a little bit for failure that way. But it also seems to make it a little easier if I just go talk to the complete stranger and be rejected by them. And so I think that is where the church has got to do a better job of equipping people with the gospel, teaching them how to make disciples so that we don't have to do outreach events for this to happen. But that it can happen in people's day-to-day lives. So when they walk out of the church on a Sunday morning, they feel equipped to go and share the gospel in their marketplace or in their neighborhood.
Okay, so on top of being afraid to talk to people, do Christians feel like the message of what they're saying isn't good enough for people who aren't visibly having issues?
I don't know if they feel like the message is not good enough. I think they feel like they just will not be listened to.
Okay.
And so, and I'll say in fairness, if you don't feel like there's a need in your life,
right,
it's harder to say, yeah, you need Jesus.
That's why we're doing this topic, because that's what we talked about last week.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, right? I mean, like I mentioned last week, I think in the episode, the story of me talking with that pastor in India.
Yeah.
And he said, you've got it harder in America because they don't there's no sense of need there.
Yeah.
And I think he's right. And I think that is a reality. Like if I'm just, if my life is okay,
Mhm.
And saying life is okay, by the way, I think is always a little dicey. I think regardless of financial security, life is difficult
Mhm.
enough for everybody because sickness doesn't play favorites, and life circumstances happen regardless of your educational or economic status.
Mhm.
So I think all of us have a sense of need, but I do think it's harder to reach people who believe that they can get through most of their needs by themselves. Like we'll just make it through it.
Mhm.
Whether I'll have to work harder or I already have the resources to overcome an illness, to overcome a sickness, to deal with life. I had the money to go pay for a counselor to help with trauma.
Mhm.
So I do think when there is greater affluence, it is more difficult to hear and to receive the gospel. But that's not like an American phenomenon. That's been the case since the time of Jesus. Jesus even said that it was more difficult for those who were rich to receive the message of the gospel and the message of the kingdom.
That was the needle thing, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And so Jesus thought it was difficult.
Yeah.
And so if he thought it was difficult, then at that point in that time, then I think the same has always held true.
Well, it
And-
feels like a challenge.
What do you mean?
Like it feels like a wink wink statement. Like, yeah, it's pretty hard. Bet you can't.
So he's appealing to to those disciples that have that. Oh yeah, well, I'll show you.
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
I can relate to that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, and I think that one thing you have to see is that it's not that they have. Jesus was not saying that because they had money they were evil,
Right.
or because they were rich that they were evil. What he was saying was because they have money, it will make them less attuned to the fact that they actually need something beyond the temporal that they have that is, quote unquote, kind of stabilizing their lives,
Okay.
bringing security to their lives.
Mhm.
And so when I talk about eternal things and spiritual things, that's hard to receive for someone that feels fairly secure in their own temporal world.
So, okay, what would you say to that person?
Say to what person? I'm
What
sorry.
would you say? Hey, I know you've got a lot of money, and I don't have as much money as you
Sure.
because I'm a pastor that makes whatever in the middle
Right.
of nowhere.
Right.
But you should try this Jesus guy out that helps me and do stuff because
Because you were created by him. And everything that has seemingly gone okay and that you have worked for, the Lord actually applauds your work ethic if you've worked.
yeah. But what could you tell them that they're missing, just like everybody else who doesn't have Jesus? Like even though they have all this stuff, what are they
Right.
missing?
I think for a lot of them, they're missing the things that most of us miss. Peace.
Okay,
They're missing joy. Not happiness, joy.
fruits of spirit.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think that's what I have literally had a millionaire sit in my car and cry and come to know Jesus.
because he lost all his money.
No, not because he lost all of his money. That would be a reason to cry. And but I think that all of us, regardless of how much money we have or don't have, we all were created for something more
Mm-hmm.
than anything that this temporal world has to offer. And so even though we have a bunch of the stuff and we can fill our lives with happiness, there's always that drive for, I need a little bit more money, or if I just do this. Yeah, I've heard this phrase growing up, and remember, I grew up in a pretty affluent family and society, and so it's always that. Well, if I can just get this next project done, if I can get this, in a few more weeks, once this is completed, then I'll be good. Then I'll be happy. Then I'll have peace. Then I'll have what I'm looking for. And I think that that's just an illusion. You may gain temporal happiness because you bought something which is really cool and awesome, and yeah, it brings some happiness, right? And so I can remember a family member pulling up in their brand new sports car that cost how many ever tens of thousands of dollars. Yeah, it was cool, right? I mean, I'm not denying that. That's cool. That's awesome. That's gonna be fun. But it doesn't bring this sense of peace and joy and actually just love toward others and not being full of angst, and it doesn't bring those things. And I genuinely think that's the thing that we are all missing. Because most other religions, that's what they're setting. That's the pull, right?
Right.
If you do these things, you'll have a sense of Zen, or you'll have a sense of peace. And so I think to the core of the human, emotions and the way we're formed and made, we're longing for something like that. And we may not always be able to put it in words really well. And so maybe I can help people put that into words. But I think that's always what we're striving for is, I want peace. I want joy. I want, but I think instead what we say is, well, if I get this temporal thing, I'll have peace. If I go to this temporal place, right, I'll have joy. I mean, how many of us go, man, if I can just get a vacation. And you go on vacation, and vacation's cool for the week. You wind down, you relax. And by the way, I'm not knocking vacations, right? I mean, our family takes vacations. I'm not knocking it. But what I'm saying is, if the goal of the vacation is to get some kind of long-lasting joy or peace, that's not real. Because as soon as you're come back from vacation, you're just thrown into the fire again.
Right.
And maybe it's even worse because you've been gone for a week. And so I think so many times we're reaching, pulling, trying to get something to bring peace and joy that's really an illusion. And that's across the board, regardless of socioeconomic or, educational status.
Church events and all the outreach stuff that we've talked about are always for needy people. Not always, but
yeah, for a lot they are.
A whole lot of them are. So why don't you host a debate me on anything night, or
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do stuff like that where people where people can come. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, where people who aren't in need can, but also need Jesus, you would say, can come and do whatever and have a reason to be here other than come to church on Sunday.
Right. No, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. In other words, I think there needs to be things that are offered that are beyond just the church providing, temporal needs for people, or meeting temporal needs for people. There's a church in Manhattan, and the pastor there, who actually just passed away from pancreatic cancer, Timothy Keller began hosting these Q&A sessions at night, and he's very educated and was living in an environment that a lot of educated people live in. And so he wanted to be able to provide a platform and a place where individuals could come in and exactly what you're talking about, whether it's debate him or whether it was to do a Q&A with him and just ask questions on different, whether it be philosophical topics, spiritual topics, whatever it may be. And he did that. And the church grew crazy because of that. Now, again, that wasn't the only thing they did. They did care for for those who were in need. They did care for the widow and for the orphan, but he did create an environment that allowed people to come in and to have these Q&As and have these discussions. And so, I actually agree with you. I think churches need to do a better job of reaching individuals as a church outreach, reach individuals that are coming from a different demographic than those that just need physical needs met.
Okay.
Yeah. But then I also will say this. Okay.
I'm never all the way right while we do these podcasts.
You're pretty right on this one, though.
You're like, you're right, but we also try.
No, like I'm saying, most churches don't try
at
all, and so that's why I'm saying you're right. I think you're insightful on this, actually. So Nate, you win. All right, you get yes. Nate's got one that's right. And what I'm also saying, though, is I think that's also the reason why we need to equip people to share the gospel in the marketplace, to share the gospel when they're in their neighborhoods. And because I really believe that we've got to move away from just all of our evangelizing being being event oriented.
Okay.
It needs to happen just in the midst of our lives.
Right.
And that's why people need. So, in other words,
but I'm talking about event.
But I know you're talking about event things. Yeah. I know. And so for the events, I agree. We need to find ways to have conversations that allow people to come in and engage with us on a level that maybe is on a more quote unquote kind of educated, platform.
Because I think what I'm thinking about is if all of your outreach programs or whatever are towards like obviously needy people, then that's going to be all your literature and all your website and everything that happens at the church. And because no one sees me talking to you about Jesus at work.
Right. Sure.
And so the whole look of church it's just for broken people.
Yeah. And I actually know churches whose stated goal is to reach people that are middle class and higher and educated.
Okay.
Like that's who sits in their chairs or their pews on Sunday morning. And that is, I know a church that's in the, city right near us, that is their stated, like their pastor will tell you, that's their stated goal.
Okay.
And that's all they do. Now they do it to the exclusion of the other.
Oh.
Yeah. And so they've kind of gone the other way. And so I think that, in other words, they
they don't need to go the other way until the other churches start going the other way. Start going their way a little bit.
Yeah. And so, but that is their stated goal, to reach that demographic you're talking about.
Okay. So along with that same thing, during churches, and this has been like the same in every church I've ever been to, all prayer requests are for sicknesses, essentially.
Yep.
For the oldest people there or the youngest people there who aren't supposed to be,
Sure, shouldn't be sick.
Be sick. And so why don't we ever just pray for the girl that needs a promotion?
Yeah.
During church. And it's always old lady stubbed her toe, 5 minutes of silence.
Yeah. Actually, to be honest with you, here's where you're right again. I read this question earlier when I was reading over the questions, and I was like, man, as a pastor, I felt rebuked for it.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
I was like, man, this is really insightful. We should be doing what Nate is saying. Why are we not doing this? Because I agree with you. I think we should be praying for people to not just be well, but we should be praying for people to, like what you said, to have promotions, and to receive raises, right? I mean, to get not just a job, but a better job. And I think that those things should happen. And so, yeah, rebuke received, and maybe you'll see me change it up this Sunday morning.
I think you said this a couple weeks ago or something, but the entire like 25 to 50-year-old group of church members have very little things to do and get very little acknowledgement as people, except when they tithe, because they're the ones that tithe the most.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if that's true or not, but it kind of feels like that.
Yeah, I mean, outside of them being the bulk of the volunteer base as well,
Right.
But
who aren't homeless,
right,
or in wheelchairs. Yeah.
Right. and so
or blind or deaf. Yeah.
Yeah. I got, yeah, they're not ever singled out or recognized, maybe is a better phrase.
I think if you keep going this direction, the whole church is going to be wheelchair ramps. You're going to have Braille Bibles. You're going to have speech to text on screen in front of the church. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, maybe we do need some of those services as well. But
that's not going to be all of church.
Right. But yeah, but I hear you. And I agree with you. I think that for that demographic you're talking about, outside of a sickness like cancer coming in or something like that, it's a pretty, we're not talking about people, we're not talking about them a lot on a Sunday morning. And I agree with you. We should be, why aren't we doing the prayer request not only for promotions or for a better job, but how many people ever put in a prayer request of, hey, I got fired from my job?
Right. People don't even put it in because they know nobody cares.
Right.
And when you bring it up, it's like, why are you bringing that up?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you're fine. Shut up.
Yeah. So actually,
my mom has cancer.
Right.
And you're worried about a few extra dollars.
Right. And no, I mean, yeah, absolutely. And we can get into these things of, kind of relative issues, but you're right. These things are important for people. And so I agree with you. I think something's got to change.
Okay. So in the end, after thinking about this, I feel like it leaves non-broken, non-Christians to feel like they just don't need Jesus because it's not for them, obviously. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not the people that they go after. So what would you say to that?
Yeah. So if I'm the non-Christian coming in, looking at it from outside in, and saying, why in the world would church ever matter to me?
Right.
Yeah, I mean,
because you would just go, "Oh, this isn't for me. This is for old people with problems."
Right, and especially if I go into the church service, right, and not only are they praying for those people, but then the messages are catered toward more self-help type things, and you're broken, or you need a breakthrough, or you need this, or you need that, and
I didn't even think about that. You did,
yeah, and you're just sitting there going, "Nah, I'm good. Like, I like my job, like my wife.
Yeah.
I'm around family. Kids are healthy. I'm okay."
Yeah. Guess I don't need this.
Right. And so I think if the church is always if it's constantly talking about what you need or what you're lacking, I don't know if that's going to connect with that person. And that is why I would go back to, we have to talk about actually what you were created for and for greater purposes and eternal things and, image of God and your identity. I think all of those things are much more relatable to an individual who's a non-Christian coming in or from a non-Christian looking at it from the outside in, I think we've got to speak to where they are at on a relatable level as well, and not just speak to the ones that are quote unquote in need of something, whether that's in need physically, emotionally, mentally, right? But actually beyond that, we've got to speak to people that don't feel this huge sense of need. So why should I be here? And we do need to let them know why.
Okay, and what about the people who pick up on the fact that they're only being talked to about this because they have some visible physical need? What would you say to them?
Wow. Yeah. If one feels that they're being talked to only because of a physical need
About Jesus.
yeah, because of physical need, man, they would feel really cheapened, wouldn't they? I heard this was just yesterday. I know someone that has been attending a church, and they've had a lot of need, in their life, and as need has kind of lessened, they have found that they go to church, the same church, and no one ever talks to them anymore. And so they have decided to leave that church because no one ever talks to them. Because all that they were was a need, right, to be met. And they were never seen as the person. And that's what I was talking about from like really early in this episode. We've got to see people as image bearers of God.
Mm-hmm.
We have to see them and get God's heart for them. And so I am afraid that we can reduce people down to just the people who are being fixed, or the people that just need. It's like you're just a problem to be solved.
Mm-hmm.
But then
a project,
or a project. That's a great way.
Jesus project.
I think that's a great way of phrasing it. And then once the project is complete,
right?
All right, see ya. Because there's not been a thought of what happens when they're actually well. What happens when they're actually not in need? What happens when they actually have their own place, or whatever it may be? And I just, my heart goes out for those people. I would feel if I'm in that position, like this other person was who decided to leave their church, that's the way I would feel too. I would go, you don't care for me. You cared to help me when I offered you some sense of feeling rewarded by your helping of me, but now I'm out. If you're not going to really invite me in, to be part of the church family, or, but rather I'm just going to always kind of be an outsider looking in. I would feel manipulated.
And what should they do at that point?
One, you may have to be like this other person and find another church that doesn't see you that way. And that's sad to say, but that's just maybe the truth. Mm-hmm. And I guess whether it's finding another church or find other people in that church, but you got to find a place that actually values you for who you are. And if they can't do that in that particular local church, go find another local church. Because you should be able to be valued for who you are, regardless of your season of life or what you've been through in your past.
Well, this has been the When I Heard This podcast. I think I'm going to go crash my car, break my own legs, burn my house down, because
you just want some sympathy, don't you?
I want people to talk to me. I get asked if I know Jesus 10 times more than I do right now.
That's probably true.
Yeah. You can find the podcast on everywhere that they have podcasts, on podcast websites for podcasts. Also on YouTube and Rumble. You can follow updates on the podcast at When I Heard This Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. Patreon, $5. Click all the buttons around the things. Like, subscribe, share, follow, download, Rumble button, comment. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Nate Robinsoff, and you can follow Joseph on Instagram at
RevJoeT.
This has been the When I Heard This podcast, and we will see you guys next time.
Bye.